I thank the chairman. Just a quick question for the gentleman from South Carolina. The two bills that we've got before us, one from Mr. Armstrong, one from Ms. Lesko, and all the various co-sponsors, to the best of my understanding, they are largely prophylactic, sort of preventing an overreach, and then with certain kind of criteria, correct? In other words, prohibiting DOE from implementing conservation standards for kitchen ranges or ovens if the standards result in the unavailability of a product based on the type of fuel the product consumes, right? In other words, saying, hey, you're rattling a lot down there, and you can say, oh, whatever, it was just a misspeak. Well, it's a misspeak by a federal official with an entire agency under that federal official saying, yeah, maybe we'll ban gas stoves. So is it not true that the legislation in question has caveats about the reach of the purpose of the legislation, right? It's saying, hey, we want to do X in order to prevent Y. Is that not correct?
Absolutely correct.
And that's not true with both pieces of legislation, correct?
That's correct.
In other words, they would still allow, what, for better or worse, by the way, different question. They would still allow regulators to regulate. They just wouldn't allow them to regulate such that the extreme happens, that consumers are unable to get the products that they want.
That's correct.
And so I think that's kind of the question that I think is most important. And when the exchange a minute ago with my friend from Kentucky about wanting to substitute our expertise, and we've had this exchange before here, and we just had it with respect to the RAINS Act, is my friend from South Carolina agree that the point here is about Congress saying, wait a second, no, this is like our fundamental job under Article 1 to go say, hey, bureaucrat, you are down there saying X. You're an expert. You're just God's gift to all things gas and energy and whatever else. You're the genius, right? You're the one who knows everything. We bumpkins sitting out in our little farms in Texas or wherever, we're a bunch of idiots. We're all going to die from stuff if you're not there protecting me. All those things. You're the genius. Are we not just saying, hold on a second, is there some check on the genius? Is there some check on whoever it is down there in the Department of Energy or whatever saying, hey, Chip, you just can't have that gas-burning stove in your house that's been there since you've been alive, or, the gas-fired stove that your grandfather cooked fried fish on, for 80 years. You can't, we don't want to have the ability in Congress to be able to check said bureaucrat if the bureaucrat wants to say, sorry, you may not be able to do that anymore?
You're exactly right. I mean, we are a representative republic. We all each represent 700+ thousand people. And there's been a lot of pushback across this country about this proposed regulation. Proposed regulations ultimately become regulations without congressional pushback like we're seeing today. And so I believe that Congress is representing our constituents who raise the alarm over what appliances they may choose for their home. When there's no clear evidence that the appliances that administration is, they're not just nudging us that way, they're shoving us in a certain direction, will be more efficient or more cost effective for the consumer. As the gentleman from Kentucky said, you're still going to burn just as much gas to heat a pot of water on a smaller burner as you did on a larger burner. You're going to do it more time, and it's going to be less efficient. The cost savings are clear that they're not there. So I think you're right. We're pushing back against the administration because we don't have an oligarchy in this country. We don't have a small group of experts that tell a democratic republic like the United States of America, this is what you have to do. We have an elected Congress. Now, we did give the administration, through numerous pieces of legislation passed before we got here, authority to do certain things. But that doesn't limit our ability to represent our constituents when they see this kind of overreach.
I would assume that my friend from South Carolina agrees. I know my friend from Kentucky and South Carolina up here agree, and maybe some others, that this might be why it's wise to vote no on the vast majority of these pieces of legislation that empower said bureaucrats and those down in the administration to do, well, frankly, just about anything at all, but in particular to be able to go down the road of possibly banning a consumer product that has been being used by millions of Americans every day for years. Quick question. part of the arguments, right, have to do with, I don't know, internal health and asthma and so forth, because somebody did a study. But to the best of my understanding, that there's no direct correlation or understanding of some sort of causation there. I mean, people have asthma for all, literally hundreds, thousands of different reasons. Is that not part of this issue that's being used? And then my question for you is actually more important, is do you think that's actually a ruse for what's really going on here, which is just a quest for the 100% electrification of America, all in pursuit of a agenda?
You're exactly right. I mean, as I pointed out earlier, those that, and I can name some Democrats on our committee that actually said they had gas stoves in their house, they like their stove, but they don't want the average American to have the same stove they have. They like their stove if they're not concerned about the air quality because they're still using older appliances. And look, I think personally that we ought to be exporting more natural gas to help the quality of lives and improve air quality for folks that are using other things to heat their homes or cook their food on and have to cook it that day because they can't have appliances like refrigerators and sometimes propane-powered refrigerators in rural areas that can actually keep food fresh. So this war on fossil fuels is trickling all the way down, my gentleman from Texas, trickling all the way down to the American consumer who's having their choices limited by a government that does not want to use fossil fuels in any shape, form, or fashion at some point in the future.
So last question, I know we're trying to be mindful of time for votes. Is the gentleman aware, or does he agree in general with the following rough proposition, that while we, this country, continue to pursue and chase the fossil fuelification of this country through massive regulations that are making it impossible, if not, really costly, if not impossible, to build fossil fuel generated power. That was in fact the purpose of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. That was in fact the goal by the massive subsidization of the, I'll call it unreliable energy that is resulting in grids that are not able to be relied upon by the American people to be sustained. And that while we're doing all of that, at the end of the day right now in China, for example, they are building 2 new coal-fired plants a week on top of the roughly 1,100 coal-fired plants they have in operation. And then we have about 250 coal-fired plants, gas-fired plants. But in Texas, for example, we're not building gas and coal-fired plants anymore because of the subsidies being put forward by the federal government. Would the gentleman agree that it is purposeful that the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies is designed with the specific intent of destroying fossil fuel-based energy, and that as a result, the United States will be weaker in terms of national security, weaker in terms of grid reliability, weaker in terms of our ability economically to be in a position to export clean-burning American natural gas, and that that taken in totality, everything I just said, if the gentleman agrees, that all of this stuff we're talking about here with gas stoves, this is just the ramifications all the way down to a person's kitchen of that same policy that the vast majority of the American people right now going about their daily life have no idea what their government is doing to them and their ability to afford energy and their ability to have human flourishing and exist on this planet that God gave us in a way that will amount to the best life for them and their children. Would the gentleman agree?
If there's a number larger than 100%, I would agree with that number. So I'd say 100% agree with you.
Thank the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you. Gentleman from New York is recognized for any questions he may have for the panel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last winter, Winter Storm Elliott hammered